Good day everyone, I am Luis Monica Obarios, the leader of Group 2. And along with me are my members who will also share their significant learnings from the 6 theories that were discussed. So let's get right into the video.
This is Alex Julian Bernabet of Group 2. Before we delve into the rabbit hole that is Freud's psychoanalytic theory, let's answer the question, who is Simon Freud? Simon Freud is an Austrian neurologist and the founder of psychoanalysis. Freud is especially famous for inventing the clinical method of psychoanalysis. Now that we know him, let's get moving to what he is famous for, psychoanalytic theory. Psychosexual theory has 5 stages that we all go through as we grow up: oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. For each stage is a specified erogenous zone. Now, each stage has requirements that has to be met, or else complications known as fixations may arise. First stage, oral. This stage starts since birth until the first 18 months. During oral stage, the mouth will be the center for pleasure. Satisfy the erogenous zone too little and the child will grow to be oral receptive. They'll have the tendency to smoke, drink, and overeat. Satisfy it too much and they will grow to become oral aggressive. They'll have the tendency to bite their nails, curse, and gossip. Second stage, anal, begins between 18 months to 3 years. The erogenous zone of this stage is the anus. The requirement that has to be met in this stage is potty training. Possible complications may come up in the process of eliminating feces, known as anal retentive and anal repulsive. Anal retentive is the fixation for cleanliness, perfection, and control. Anal repulsive is when the person becomes messy and unorganized as they grow up. Third stage, phallic, begins between ages 3 to 6 years old. The erogenous zone of this stage is the genitals. Children would sometimes touch their genitals. In this stage, the child's parents take center stage. 2 fixations will arise in this stage, Oedipus complex and Electra complex. In Oedipus complex, boys will unconsciously develop feelings for their mother and may see their father as a rival. The child fears that their father will punish them, resulting in anxiety. Instead of fighting their father, the child will choose to identify with their father, therefore developing masculine traits. The same goes for Electra complex, but in the case of the daughter will unconsciously develop feelings for her father, so on and so forth. Fourth stage, latency, between ages 6 until puberty hits. In this stage, sexual feelings are inactive and remain suppressed. Children of this stage focus more on acquiring skills, both academically and physically. Moving on through psychoanalytic theory are the 3 components of personality: id, ego, and superego. Every child is born with id. Id is in charge of satiating the needs of the child. Operating on the pleasure feels, id focuses on whatever feels good, regardless of the situation. Ego emerges as the child relates to their environment. Ego operates on reality principle and is able to recognize that being selfish or impulsive will result in negative consequences. Ego helps the id in experiencing one's need while accounting for the reality of the situation. Ego is also identified as a deciding factor of the personality. Third and final component of personality is superego. Superego develops at the end of phallic stage. Superego is identified as the moral conscience of a person. It tells a person between what is right and what is wrong. Now, there are 3 levels of consciousness. Unconscious mind that exists outside one's awareness, the preconscious mind where information you may not know exists of but can be recalled, and the conscious mind, which is known as a person's current state of awareness. That is all for the psychoanalytic theory by Simon Freud.
Hi, my name is Asha Joy P. Buduan and I'm discussing about Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development. His theory focuses not only on understanding how children acquire their knowledge, but also understanding the nature of their intelligence. Jean Piaget, 1896 to 1980. He developed the first major theory of cognitive development. He viewed children for the first time as a little scientist. There are basic cognitive concepts. First is the schema. It creates experiences. Next is assimilation. This process of fitting new experience into an existing experience. Next is accommodation. It is a process of creating new schema. And lastly is the equilibration. a proper balance between assimilation and accommodation. The cognitive development according to Piaget. The sensory motor stage ages from birth to 2 years old. The infant knows the world through their movements and sensation. This stage occurs through basic reflexes, senses, and motor responses. Next is the pre-operational stage, wherein ages from 2 to 7 years old. The child begins to think symbolically and learn to use words and pictures to represent objects. Kids learn egocentrism, the child to only see his point of view, centration, irreversibility, animism, and transductive reasoning. Next is the concrete operational stage, from ages 7 to 11 years old. During this stage, children begin to think logically about concrete events. Also, children become less egocentric and begin to think other people's feelings. The reversible know how to conserve and has a ration. Lastly, the formal operational stage, ages 12 and up. At this stage, adolescent or young adult begins to think abstractly and reason about hypothetical problem and deductive reasoning. Become more capable of seeing multiple potential and think more scientifically about the world around them. Jean Piaget's theory was focused on the development of the intelligence due to the children's adaptation to the environment. Moreover, Piaget identified the different cognitive development of the child. Thank you.
Hi! This is April Kyle Camanio from Group 2. Erikson's theory was largely influenced by Sigmund Freud. He expanded Freud's psychosexual theory by highlighting the cultural aspects of personal development. At each stage, a person faces a psychosocial crisis that must be handled in order for a child to grow in a healthy and well-adjusted adult. If the person fails to overcome the crisis, he may develop maladaptation and malignancies. In contrary, successful completion in each stage results in a healthy personality and the acquisition of basic virtues. Now let's dive on Erikson's 8 stages of psychosocial development. The first stage is what we call the infancy. It occurs between 1 to 1.5 years old. The psychosocial crises faced in this stage are trust versus mistrust. According to Erikson, it is the most fundamental stage in life. At this stage, the child is completely reliant and dependent on the parents or guardian. If the parents are consistent in creating a safe environment for their child, the child will develop a sense of trust. If parents, on the other hand, are inconsistent in providing the needs of infant, a sense of mistrust will develop on the part of the infant. The second stage is early childhood. It occurs between 3 to 4 years old. Autonomy versus shame. According to Erikson, if parents let their children to make their own decisions, they will develop a sense of autonomy, which will allow them to attain personal control and independence. Those who do not, on the other hand, are left with a sense of inadequacy, which leads to a sense of shame. At this stage, a child will either become compulsive or impulsive. Early childhood occurs between 4 to 6 years old. Initiative versus guilt. Through social interactions and play, children are now capable of initiating activities and beginning to establish control over their environment. It's also the stage where kids wish to start and finish their own task for a specific reason. Children may feel guilty if such initiatives do not provide the anticipated result. School age occurs between 6 to 12 years old. Industry versus inferiority. Children gain pride in their abilities and accomplishments through social interactions, especially in schoolwork, social activities, and family life. When children are praised and encouraged, they develop a sense of being industrious and competent. However, if children do not receive support from their parents and instructors, they will doubt their ability to succeed, which may lead to the formation of an inferiority complex. Adolescence occurs between 18 to 20 years old. Identity versus role confusion. This stage is critical in the formation of one's identity. Erickson claims that if teenagers are properly encouraged in their personal discovery, they will emerge from this stage with a strong sense of self and the ability to stick to their values and convictions in the face of adversity. Those who do not receive adequate support and reinforcement will develop a shaky sense of self and experience role confusion. Young adult occurs between 18 to 30 years old. Intimacy versus isolation. After adolescence, the person has established a sense of self and is now able to share his life with others. Those who succeed at this stage are able to form close relationships that are both lasting and stable, and which may eventually lead to the development of a virtue known as love. People may develop a sensation of isolation if they are unable to form close relationships with others. Middle adulthood occurs between middle 20s and late 50s. Generativity versus stagnation. A sense of generativity or production and successes emerges at this stage. When a person makes a major contribution, such as raising a family or engaged in a productive employment that benefits the society. Those who fail to complete this work may feel stuck, unproductive, and uninterested. The last stage is what we call maturity. Ego integrity versus despair. People's productivity declines as they age, and they begin to explore life as retirees. They reflect on their achievements and experience a sense of integrity when they are proud of them. Those who fail to complete their mission during this stage, on the other hand, may feel that their lives have been wasted and reflect on their lives with many regrets. They are faced with many sentiments of depression and bitterness as they approach the end of their lives, which will finally lead to despair.
Hi, this is Luis Monica Barrios of Group 2. In this story of Kohlberg, we are going to know if we were really born good and if our morals do really came from our biological and cultural evolution. So individuals, when confronted by situations where they need to make moral decisions, exercises their own ability to use moral reasoning. So Kohlberg based his theory on the findings of Piaget in studying cognitive development, in which our ability to choose right from wrong is tied with our ability to understand and reason logically. To support his theory, he proposed 6 stages with 3 major levels. First is the pre-conventional level, which is purely based on the consequences of the actions and not on the actions itself. Stage 1 is punishment or obedience, wherein a person will act in order to avoid punishments. Stage 2, mutual benefit, wherein a person will act depending on his or her benefit to be obtained later on. Moving on to the second level, the conventional, which is based on the conventions or norms of the society, including the approval from others. So under this is stage 3, which is the social approval. One is motivated by what others expect in behavior, wherein he or she gives high importance on what people would think and say. Stage 4, on the other hand, is the law and order, in which one is motivated to act in order to uphold the law. Thus, he or she follows everything on the law. Lastly, the third stage, which is the post-conventional level. So the moral reasoning here is based on the enduring or consistent principles. It is not just recognizing the law, but the principles behind the law as well. So stage 5 is the social contract, wherein one will act based on social justices and the common good. Thus, believes that laws that are wrong can be changed. And the last but not the least stage is the universal principles, which is associated with the development of one's conscience or a set of standards that drives one to possess moral responsibility to make societal changes regardless of consequences to oneself. So that is all for Kohlberg's stages of moral development, and we have learned that we have biases and we have initial moral sense. However, as we grow old, we've been educated, enculturated, and so our preferences are changing. Therefore, we can conclude that the good and the bad are products of our biological and cultural evolution. That would be all. Thank you.
Lesson 7. Lev Vygotsky's Sociocultural Theory. In this theory, it is believed that social interaction plays a vital role in cognitive development, that an individual's development could not be understood without looking into the social and cultural context wherein development happens. Along the way of Lev's learning and experience, together with his interest in literature and work as a teacher, it led him to recognize two central factors in cognitive development, which are the social interaction and the language. That is why his theory became known as the sociocultural theory of development. So Piaget's theory and Vygotsky's theory are being differentiated, wherein in Piaget's theory, it focuses more on individual, while in Vygotsky, it focuses on social. Piaget believed that there are universal stages in cognitive development. In Vygotsky, he did not propose any stages, but he emphasized the cultural factors in cognitive development. In Piaget's theory, he did not give emphasis about language, while in Vygotsky, he stressed the role of language in cognitive development. Social interaction. Vygotsky focused on social interaction. Vygotsky gave more weight on the social interaction that contributed to the cognitive development of an individual. For him, the social environment or the community takes a major role in one's development. Vygotsky emphasized that effective learning happens through participation in social activities. Thus, making social context of learning is crucial. Parents, teachers, and other adults in the learner's environment all contribute to the process. Adults explain, model, assist, give directions, and provide feedback to the learner. Peers, on the other hand, cooperate and collaborate and enrich the learning experience. Cultural factors. Vygotsky believed in the crucial role of culture to the development and the wide range of experiences that a culture would give to a child. Language. Language opens the door for learners to acquire knowledge that others already have. Learners can use language to know and understand the world and solve problems. Language serves as a social function, but it also has an individual function. It helps the learner regulate and reflect on his own thinking. For Vygotsky, talking to himself is an indication of thinking that goes in the mind of a child. This will eventually lead to private speech. It is a form of self-talking that guides the child's thinking and action. Vygotsky believed in the essential role of activities in learning. Children learn best through hands-on activities than when listening passively. In this theory, there are zones of development. First is the zone of actual development. It is when a child attempts to perform a skill alone. Next is the more knowledgeable others, when a child is being guided by a competent adult or a more advanced peer. In this theory, Vygotsky proposed scaffolding. It is the support or assistance that lets the child accomplish a task he cannot accomplish independently.
Lesson 8. Yuri Bronfenbrenner's Ecological Theory. This is Mark Darrell Cagas of Group 2, and we will now focus on Yuri Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory. So, bioecological systems, also known as Bronfenbrenner's model, is a theory which states that the child's development and growth is highly influenced by his or her surrounding, and this effect has a high impact and can be a major factor in one's development as they grow. The theory presents 5 layers that affect the growth of a child, namely microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, macrosystem, and coronal systems. Microsystem, being the layer nearest to the child, discovers those interactions that immediately affects the child's belief, behavior, mannerism, and many more that the child sees in his or her environment that they grew up with. The interaction affects the child while also affecting those people that the child interacts with. Mesosystem is the connection of those that surrounds the child, like parents and relatives and etc. Their interaction with the community and how they interact with other factors of the surrounding environment. Exosystem is the factors that doesn't involve the child or the child does not actively participate but indirectly influences the child's development nonetheless. Macrosystem. This contains the customs, beliefs, laws or rules, and cultural values that influence how a child perceives those that surround him or her. These events occur and eventually reaches the child. Chronal system. These are events that happen over time. It covers events that include the effects of time which relate to a child's environment, the patterns of change or changes in the daily routine, changes with the people interacted with, or environmental changes, and many more. This causes the child to develop or acquire the ability to cope with the changes and manipulate how these changes affect them to an extent. Bronfenbrenner's model mainly mentions that the environment the child grows up in play a key factor in their growth and development. This theory helps us to understand how different circumstances and relationships in the world affects the child as he goes through a sequence of natural growth and development. That would be all, and thank you for listening.